Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the categories of Indian thought and why we can understand them as a genuine form of philosophical reflection, not just as religious or mystical speculation. This presentation draws on the works of Fernando Tola and Carmen Dragonetti in their study Philosophy of India from the Vedas to the Vedanta, and also on Oscar Figueroa's reflections about how Indian thought has been interpreted and sometimes misinterpreted through Western perspectives. For centuries, Indian thought was often described in the West as spiritual or mystical rather than philosophical. Tola and Dragonetti challenged this idea. They argued that Indian philosophy has its own methods of reasoning, categories of analysis, and systems of logic, comparable to those of the Greek or Western traditions. According to them, the apparent opposition between Indian truth and philosophy is a myth, a result of Eurocentric perspectives that define philosophy according to Greek standards. But if we look closely, the Indian tradition shows the same philosophical concerns. What is the nature of reality? How can we know what is true? What is the self? What is the ultimate purpose of existence? These are undeniable philosophical questions. Indian philosophy is not a single doctrine, it is a plural system of schools, darsanas, each with its own approach. However, several core categories structure this thought. Let's look at some of them. Number one, reality, sattva. In many systems, like Samkhya, reality is analyzed into fundamentals principles. Samkhya, for instance, distinguishes between purusa and prakti, pure consciousness and primordial matter. This dualism is not a mythological idea, but a metaphysical analysis of existence. Number two, knowledge, pramana. The Indian tradition developed sophisticated epistemologies. Systems like Jaya establish categories of valid knowledge: perception, inference, comparison, and testimony. Centuries before Western theories emerged. Number three, action and ethics, Dharma, Karma. The concepts of Dharma and Karma organize moral and social life, but also express a philosophy of causality and responsibility. Actions produce effects, not as divine punishment, but as ontological consequences in the chain of being. Number four, liberation, moksha. Almost all Indian systems share the goal of liberation from ignorance and suffering, whether through knowledge, devotion, or discipline, action. This goal is philosophically grounded in an understanding of the self and reality. These categories, being, knowledge, action, and liberation, form the core philosophical framework of Indian thought. As Oscar Figueroa notes, thinkers like Jose Vasconcelos once tried to include India within a synthetic wisdom, but often from a Western-centric vision. Figueroa invites us to recognize Indian philosophy on its own terms, as a system with its own internal coherence and rationality. In this sense, comparing Indian and Western thought should not mean ranking them, but putting them in a dialogue. While Greek philosophy starts from being and logos, Indian philosophy often begins with consciousness and liberation. Both, however, seek understanding and transcendence through reason. To conclude, the categories of Indian thought reveal a profound philosophical tradition grounded in analysis, reflection, and the pursuit of truth. By recognizing this, we move beyond the old myth that separates mystical India from rational philosophy. And we begin to see a global history of that where India's contribution is essential. Thank you for watching.